Chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, for his questions.
Mr. Strzok, first of all, let me say this, that to the members of the FBI who may be watching this, I want them to be clear that we have the utmost respect for the organization. And I thank them for doing what they do every day and protecting our rights and protecting our people and protecting our way of life. And thank you very much. Let me ask you this. In previous testimony to Congress, President Trump's FBI Director, Christopher Wray, explained the critical importance of protecting confidential human sources. And this is what he said, Agent Strzok, and I quote, "The day we can't protect human sources is the day the American people start becoming less safe," end of quote. Do you agree with that?
I do.
The problem is we now have the transcript of your 11-hour closed-door interview with our committees, and it shows that Republican members asked you repeatedly about confidential human sources involved in the Russia investigation. Is that correct?
My recollection is yes, sir.
Do you remember how many questions they asked you about that?
I do not, sir.
Let me read one of their questions from the transcript. One Republican member asked you this question, and I quote, "In the month of July, was there any information from confidential human sources given to you as it relates to the Russia investigation?" End of quote. Do you recall being asked that question?
I do.
That question was specifically about information from confidential human sources in the Russia investigation. Obviously, you could not answer the question, and that is because the Department of Justice has a long-standing policy against revealing information from confidential human sources during an ongoing criminal investigation. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will yield if at the end I want to finish. And that is what Director Wray was talking about when he testified that revealing those sources or their information will make America less safe. Is that right?
I don't know why Director Wray said that, but I agree with his statement.
In your experience, how dangerous could it be to reveal the identity of a confidential human source?
Extraordinarily dangerous.
Will the gentleman yield to his friend?
Of course.
I thank the gentleman. I want to be clear, since the gentleman from Maryland, who is my friend, is going along a line of argument that would suggest a question asked by me. I want to make it perfectly clear. I ask if you talked with confidential human sources. I never asked for a name, nor would I ever ask for a name of a confidential human source. I appreciate it. I'll yield back.
I don't think I said that. But anyway.
Now, you and Ms. Page used personal phones and accounts to communicate. Have you turned over those communications to the Inspector General?
No, sir.
If not, why not?
Sir, they asked, and working with my attorney, the Inspector General and I arranged an agreement where I would go through my personal accounts and identify any material that was relevant to FBI business and turn it over. It was reviewed, there was none, and my understanding is the Inspector General was satisfied with that action.
We know from text that you and Ms. Page would transition to iMessage and Gmail. Who determined that messages were only personal in nature and not business related, especially since you've just testified at length that a number of the communications that you have made on government communications devices were personal in nature?
Sir, the broad context of what I used personal email and phones for was personal communication. For those things that were work-related, almost universally that material was translated into FBI systems. Certainly if it was anything that was a record or would constitute needing to be there, it was provided, but I made that decision.
Mr. Strzok, did you ever believe these texts would become public?
I did not.
Given that, You felt free to express your true feelings, didn't you?
I suppose, yes. That's a difficult question to answer.
Mr. Strzok, the FBI is a creation of this body. Congress created the FBI with its constitutional authority. Today, you are here under subpoena. I know you've come voluntarily in your opinion, but you're also under subpoena, also an exercise of Congress's constitutional authority. Which takes precedence, FBI policy or the United States Constitution?
Sir, always the United States Constitution. My understanding is I am not here under subpoena, that I am here voluntarily. I understand a subpoena was issued for my prior closed interview, but not for this session today.
A subpoena was issued and service of which was accepted.
That's not my understanding, sir.
So the chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Thank you. Let me begin by congratulating the witness on his completely correct statement of key First Amendment law, that people are entitled to political opinions. Now, you, sir, obviously expressed your political opinions as to Mr. Trump and Hillary Clinton and various others in text messages to Lisa Page.
I did.
And she to you.
Yes.
And these were private political opinions.
Yes.
Which you did not express publicly.
Correct.
And the Inspector General found, with respect to the investigation to Hillary, quote, "We found no evidence that the conclusions by the prosecutors were affected by bias or other improper considerations. Rather, we determined that they were based on the prosecutor's assessment of the facts, the law, and past department practices." That is correct, that is the finding of the IG, no?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And with respect to the Russia investigation, the IG said that that he was disturbed by the appearance that investigative decisions might be impacted by bias, but made no such findings, and in fact hadn't completed his investigation of the Russia investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, when people talk about the appearance, whether people on this panel or the Inspector General, the appearance of bias created by those text messages, those text messages might create the appearance of bias only if they're public. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Because otherwise there'd be no appearance.
That's correct.
And they were not intended to be public, were they?
Correct.
They were communications between two private individuals.
True.
Which are totally permitted.
That's correct.
Now, are FBI agents permitted to have political opinions?
Yes.
And as a 22-year veteran of the FBI, could you tell us, without naming names, were you familiar with the fact, with other FBI personnel having political opinions with respect to the presidential campaign?
I was.
And were some of these people anti-Trump?
They were.
And were some of these people pro-Trump?
Yes.
Thank you. And to your knowledge, did any of the pro-Trump bias or the anti-Trump bias in personal opinions affect decisions and investigations by the FBI?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the Hatch Act.
Yes.
Under the Hatch Act, the FBI is prohibited, is it not, from inquiring as to the political opinions of people it is hiring?
I don't know the Hatch Act well enough to tell you.
Well, I'll say that that is the case. The government may not, under the Hatch Act, inquire as to the political opinions of people it is hiring for non-exempt positions. And to do so would be improper. And I must say that I think that all of these inquiries about your political opinions as revealed by these text messages are irrelevant and wrong unless it can be shown, as it has not been shown, as was found definitively not to be the case in the Hillary investigation and has not been shown in the Russia investigation, that they affected any decisions in the investigation. Let's leave it at that on that point. Republicans are in effect demanding that DOJ violate the very policies the Inspector General criticized the department for violating in 2016. This is incredibly inappropriate and dangerous, and we are forced to ask ourselves, why? Why have House Republicans been so dismissive of Russia's attacks on the United States? Why are Republicans so intent on destroying public confidence in the Justice Department and in the special counsel's investigation? Why have they abandoned House rules to pick totally unnecessary fights with you, Mr. Strzok, with Lisa Page, and with Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein? The obvious answer is because they are scared. Because President Trump is scared. Because the special counsel's investigation is operating at a breakneck pace and has already produced 5 guilty pleas and criminal charges against 23 individuals and entities. Because accountability is coming one way or another, and they are scared and they are trying to undermine the investigation and to distract attention. And I don't know if demand is the right word, but I demand insofar as I can that transcript be released in full so that people can see it, can see the testimony today, and can make better judgments. And I ask the chairman now to order the release of that transcript. Will the chairman do so?
Not today.
Will the chairman ever do so?
You can direct your questions to the witness. That's your time to do that, not to discuss this.
I will observe that the chairman will not answer the question and that this is part of the continuing evasion and attempt at obfuscation because
Will
we
the gentleman
know,
yield?
No, not at the moment. I will in
Very
a
good.
moment when I finish the sentence. Because we know the pattern. And the pattern is we're not releasing transcripts except parts of them that may convey the impression, false or true, that we want to convey. There is no legal reason why this transcript should not be released. There is only a partisan reason why this transcript should not be released. There is no valid reason why it should not be released. If there was a purpose to our inquiries, to our spending 11 hours, there's no reason they shouldn't be released. I'll yield now.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I would just say that it is very customary in investigations to keep transcripts of private interviews until the conclusion of the investigation. This investigation certainly hasn't concluded, and it is very appropriate that the questions that were asked and the answers given are not shared with other potential witnesses.
Reclaiming my time, I will observe that many of the same questions are being asked today, number one. But number two, given the fact that selective portions of the transcript have been leaked, I think that changes it. I'll yield to Mr. Cicilline.
No, I was just going to inquire. I've sort of been trying to get the answer to this question, but to the extent that this transcript is available to all of us, I intend to release it. I can't find any prohibition that makes us unable to release it in our rules. We now have the same witness after 11 hours here in a public hearing, so the notion that we have to somehow keep this secret while pieces that are being released is doing a real disservice to the American people. And I'm asking the ranking member, is there any reason this afternoon I can't just release it as a member of this committee?
Would the ranking member yield?
Let me, 1 second. I'm not aware of any, but I have to look at the House rules and all. I will yield.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. It is correct that both members on the Republican side and the Democratic side have used quotations from the transcript for the purpose of interviewing a hearing, and that is a legitimate use of the transcript.
And I'm reclaiming my time. Some members have also used it for the purpose of talking to the news media, and that may be or may not be an appropriate use. But be that as it may, the transcript should be released. I yield back.
Gentleman yield.
Yes, I'll yield to the gentleman from Maryland.
I'd like to ask the ranking member if it's legitimate within the rules of the committee in the House of Representatives for members to release certain portions of the overall transcript. Is there anything that would prevent us from releasing the entire transcript?
I'm unaware of anything that would, off the top of my head, that would prevent a member from releasing the transcript. But that's off the top of my head. I wouldn't want to say that definitively.
Mr. Chairman, are you aware of anything that would preclude us from doing that?
Yeah, the decision is made by the chairman of the committee.
Before I yield back, let me just say, we don't want
Chairman,
portions released.
I'm not in the practice of having the chairman of the committee make decisions for me. So could you explain to me, is there a rule that precludes me from this afternoon releasing this transcript? If it's just your preference I don't, that's not sufficient.
This is a conduct of an investigation. The chair of the two committees are conducting that investigation. We will decide when transcripts of private interviews are going to be released. No one on this side of the aisle has released it other than to ask a question based upon it in a hearing, which is an appropriate use of it.
Reclaiming my time.
We could release it as part of this hearing. Mr.
Reclaiming my time, I will observe that some members have released parts of the transcript by being quoted in the media, not for questions here. Does the gentleman from Rhode Island still want time?
I just have a unanimous consent request. I'd ask unanimous consent that the transcript of this witness be made an official part of this record in its entirety.
I object.
Objection is heard.
Well,
Roll call
I'm not
vote.
the gentleman from
Roll call vote.
I yield to
I
the
thank the
from Rhode
gentleman for
Island.
yielding. Again, Mr. Chairman, I think this is of tremendous interest to the American people. There's an effort here to sort of characterize this witness's behavior. Much ado has been made of it. We had an 11-hour hearing in which this very same witness testified. He's now testifying consistently before the American people. There seems to me, no good reason, other than a personal preference of some apparently, that this transcript not be released. And I would say to the chairman respectfully, if there is no prohibition, the fact that you would prefer we not is insufficient to persuade me, and I think Mr. Raskin, and we intend to release this transcript unless someone presents us with some rule under our House proceedings or this committee that prevents us from doing it. And we'll give you till 5 o'clock this afternoon to present that. Otherwise, we intend to release the transcript.
Reclaiming my time. I'll simply, I want to associate myself with the remarks of the gentleman from Rhode Island. I would agree with him. I think it would be a public service to release these transcripts. That's why I demanded they be released. There's no good reason not to. And at this point, I think I'll yield back the balance of my time.
The chair wants to respond to the gentleman from Rhode Island. First of
And I will
all,
yield back the balance of my time.
First of all, there was an agreement in the interview that it was private, confidential, and that it would not be released. So that is not going to take place under this set of circumstances. Secondly, if the gentleman, we're here investigating irregularities conducted in investigations by the FBI. If the gentleman wants to perpetuate that by creating irregularities here and releasing questions so that other potential future witnesses can read the question before they're asked, that is, in my opinion, exactly what many on the gentleman's side of the aisle have been all about, attempting to disrupt this investigation and this hearing process from start to finish.
Reclaiming my time. Mr. Strzok.
Would the gentleman yield?
Reclaiming my
Mr.
time.
Chairman, I object.
Mr.
He's yielded his
Strzok, would
time
you
3
object
times.
to the release of the transcript of that hearing?
No, I would not object.
Thank you. I will observe then that the minority, the chairman says that there was an agreement, not on the conduct of that hearing. The minority was not party to that agreement. There may have been an agreement between Mr. Gowdy and Mr. Goodlatte, but at no point were we asked.
It was stated on the record in the hearing.
It was stated as a decision, as a fact, as a fait accompli. We were not asked. We agreed to nothing because we were not asked. And we think that the transcript ought to be released for the reasons stated. And if the witness doesn't object, I don't know why the majority should object. And I yield to Mr. Meadows.
If the gentleman will yield, in earnest, I will be glad to work with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle about releasing all relevant information. I mean, I think if we're talking about full transparency, let's talk about full transparency in a variety of other things. It's interesting we want to release one thing, but yet we're somehow allowing Peter Strzok to suggest that there's a whole lot of things that are off the record. And so, but I will work in earnest with my colleagues.
I appreciate the gentleman, and let me simply say that we are not disrupting a legitimate investigation into the investigation. The Republican investigation is intended to and is trying to disrupt the investigation into the Russian interference in our election by the special counsel.
Would the gentleman
That's
yield?
what's really at stake. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. All right. So now that the chairman and the ranking member have had ample time to ask questions, and I think that the gentleman from New York has the record, we are going to move, because we have 72 more members who have questions to ask, to strict adherence to the 5-minute rule.